Okay, then we can begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fragments of silicon, hoping you stay dry, even if that's monumentally unlikely.
Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon, pre-Hurricane Edition. More on that later. But I'm your host, Adam, and joining me, as always, is the crew. Full board this day. So we've got Ogre.
I'm very tired.
Petty Fan.
Are we smooth bore or rifle bore?
Galax.
I am tired and also kind of wet.
And Twilight.
I'm alive.
Okay. Oh, not energetic note. Let's see. Ogre, why don't you go into the details of why you're so tired this week?
On Saturday, Knock and Barry got married.
Oh, man.
Yep, they tied the knot then. Spent all day, almost all day there.
Jeez.
Yeah, weddings tend to take up a whole day, even if you don't plan them to.
I got there around 10. Didn't get home till about 7:30 or so. But it was a nice little experience and everything. I was the best man because...
Who else would have been?
Because they couldn't find anyone better?
No. I probably could have found someone better, but I guess I was just the one who's known him the longest, so...
Alright.
So that, entire week was kind of filled with exhausting going about and doing stuff. Like, we had this quote-unquote bachelor party, which is just us going to a Japanese steakhouse and eating there for a bit. Then we hung out Sunday because a bunch of friends came up. It was Bear, Goron, and Lenny came up for the wedding as well. And Sunday was the last day we were all going to be together for that, so we went out and played mini golf.
Oh, man.
Monday...
Did everyone let Naka win?
I can't remember if he won or not. I think he did.
But also Naka could be good at mini golf, so that's the thing.
I know, it was just a joke.
I actually got 3 holes in ones, but then I got a bunch of 6s as well, so kind of all averaged out to 5th place. Then Monday we hung out and did a bit of a stream there. And I could have fallen asleep Monday and woken up next Monday and still felt like I wasn't completely rested from all that. Which is to say, probably they are really fucking exhausted themselves because of everything. Because they had to bear every brunt of that whole wedding ceremony, so... I think they're just happy to have it all done and over with so they can finally sleep for a while.
They've been together for 100,000 years,
so... that was kind of part of my best man speech, was that it felt like Barry was involved in every memory that Knock and I have had, so...
I mean, I kind of remember some time period where she wasn't there, but that really feels like another lifetime.
Other than that, we didn't record Monday, obviously. We did record the Monday prior, so that whole TMNT thing was done on one day.
It's
And then a little bit the next episode into that, next Let's Play into that.
Right. Like, you haven't exactly been subtle about it.
Then we'll probably do another arcade game, and then something for Halloween. Just to get that out of the way.
Maybe this is the year he finally remembers to do Doom.
I thought you were going to say Dead Space, and I was like, I don't know anymore. That I end up doing with Dead Space 3, and then I'll be upset because it ended on a cliffhanger that was kind of a terrible thing, and then I might have to just strangle EA for a bit.
Not an uncommon feeling towards EA for a bit.
Yeah.
I was about to say, I'm pretty sure you'd have to be join a line for that.
I think that's the Mass Effect set in the front currently.
I'm pretty sure they still have to wait behind everyone else who got screwed over before them. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long line.
But they're still the ones who got the very blatant. Well, all of your moral choices add up to choosing which color the ending cinematic will be.
Other than that, not a whole lot this week. It's just the cooldown period for afterwards and all that, so thankfully I get to sleep in for once. Every once in a while. Except for Tuesday, where I woke up early for the interview and then found out it was in the afternoon. I was like, fuck, I'm still awake. Who cares?
You showed up. So.
Yeah. Well, apparently we got 2 o'clock and 1 o'clock mixed up, but other than that...
Time zones.
I know. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much about it for me, so... Next.
Alright, Galix, why did you go?
Well, my parents just got home from their vacation literally a couple hours before I got home today. So they're settling back in. I'm tired mostly because the cat woke me up 2 times last night. I don't have anything as dramatic as ogres. And it's been pretty rainy the last few days here, which I think are mostly or possibly related to spin-offs from hurricane weather, but thankfully it's not that bad here because nothing is... Rainstorms don't usually get that bad this far north on account of cold water and stuff.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's fun, but I finished the single-player mode in Splatoon 2 the other day. That was nice because now I can get those other amiibo costumes from Callie and Marie. Splatfest that was past weekend was also fun. And I need to get around to playing the games for this week because both of the ones for this week that I have, I think, have some kind of multiplayer stuff. So probably good to get in some practice beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, that's about all I got, I think.
Okay. Twilight?
Well, as I said last week, there was a family medical concern that took place. And that's come to pass, and it's turned out well. Yeah, my aunt had to end up in the hospital because of a mini stroke, but she's recovered.
That's good.
Yeah, she's been released, and she's as lively as ever. Understatement there. Anyway, my mother's now got a new PC after her old one, might as well be said to died.
Lovely.
Yeah, and besides that, I've been playing the 2 games we have for review for this week. And that'll be it for me.
All right. Petty Fan, you're up.
I think I've basically completed Sonic Mania except for like 2 Blue Sphere medals and maybe some other achievements, but yeah. I kind of put a lot of time into that game.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. And is it bad? I'm debating buying it again for PC.
Like, all right, Tomy Johnny.
I already bought it twice because I ordered it for PC and then it got delayed and I bought it on Switch when it came out.
Yeah. It's a really good game. People should buy it. Cough, cough.
Yeah. Are you glad you didn't get the pre-order, or?
Well, it's more I didn't need. I already had the original Sonic game.
Right.
So, and originally I was gonna get the collector's edition, but I had to cancel that.
That's what I'm talking about. Like that really huge statue that's really shitty.
I've heard mixed things about the
Yeah.
quality, but it's definitely really huge, and it's not like solid. It's light.
Yeah. It's like, I still might see about getting if I see it cheap on eBay. But like throwing $70 on it right now isn't exactly a doable thing. Oh, let's see. Aside from that, I need to get to playing games for the show this week, and not really a whole lot.
Okay.
Like Final Fantasy's still been a thing, and I've also shot off some emails for guests for MSP.
Yeah. We'll talk more about that after this. I suppose. I mean, any conversation without Mac is not going to go anywhere. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, I suppose it's my go.
Yep.
Like, okay, first thing is, well, I mean, as we are recording this, let's see, we are a couple days out, maybe 3-4 days from Hurricane Irma hitting the mainland of Florida. Right now, it's set to ravage Puerto Rico and Cuba, and yeah, and basically my whole state is in a literal state of emergency. Like, I had to spend a large portion of yesterday preparing for that as best could be prepared, because it's been very panicky. Even as far north as I am, wasn't able to secure any bottled water yesterday because it's all gone.
Holy
Like
shit.
that shit. Yeah, I'm like, that shit's getting purchased 5-10 minutes off the pallets.
Yeah, and
That's
even
all
if it's not a lot of spare stock here is being sent to Texas.
Yeah, I'm like, and I'm sure, and you know, gas shortages are starting. Glad the cars was filled up beforehand. You know, basically a lot of preparation right now. Although, as far as evacuation, that may or may not happen. We're still too far out from the actual path and the results to really know what's going to happen. Other than it looks like South Florida, you know, Miami, Florida Keys area is going to get hit, and then most models have it tracking up the East Coast, and then it's going to hit South Carolina or North Carolina again. I'm like, but it could still move more, well, eastward.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know a lot about hurricanes, when they hit land, they do funny shit.
Yes. I'm like, hopefully it's not, well, hopefully it gets downgraded before it hits, because, you know, it's a record-setting Cat 5 right now, but it's still got a few Caribbean islands to go through before it hits Florida. And so right now,
not that we're hoping that those islands get smashed too much either, but
no. Yeah. But I mean, speaking personally, I'd rather not, you know, have that thing be as big as it is.
Oh no, yeah, I know. I have a friend who watches the show sometimes. She's in the Dominican Republic, so.
Right. I'm like, I'm not sure if it's planning if it's going to hit Hispaniola though. Like, I think it's
like right between Puerto Rico and Cuba, so.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm not sure if like all the news has been about, you know, Antigua and Barbuda, Bermuda, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. You know, I haven't heard anything about the Dominican Republic or Haiti. is what I'm saying. So I don't know how much in the blast zone that island is, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. So everything's kind of touch and go at the moment. Now, it's like it's hunkered down now, but may have to evacuate later on. And even then, I don't know what the hurricane does to this show, because even if we don't get like the brunt, or like even if we get like the outer bands, we could still be out without electricity for a while. I'm like, that happened to me back in 2005 when Hurricane Francis hit Jacksonville, and I was without power for a week. It's not something I'd recommend.
No, that sounds really, really sucky.
Yeah, so basically, I guess a programming note, if we don't go live with our review Sunday at our usual time, I'll start streaming about 30 minutes after.
Right. We will get back to everything as soon as possible. I mean, we do have like guests lined up and all that stuff, but if they have to be delayed because of the weather, then so be it. Because this show, truth be told, isn't really built to function without me.
Right, and it's not like we can just say, "Please, Mr. Stormmeister, aim the hurricane slightly to the left."
Right.
I guess kind of a question. Have you let the devs and publishers who gave us games to review know that they could be delayed because of the storm if you lose power?
Not yet. I'm like,
one of the things on the list.
If it comes up to it, it's something I can't do until it happens.
Fair enough.
Like, because everything until it until the delay actually happens, because it could potentially not happen. I've been through a lot of hurricane scares over the years, and a lot of it is not as bad as it ends up being. Occasionally it is, but I'm like, I don't know what's going to go on, especially with this area. So I'm like, things get delayed. We'll take care of it in its due course. Outside of that, it's business as usual. Like, and I think that's about all I can report about that situation at present time. Probably will have an update, because we are planning to do a multiplayer session on Friday, and it should be a lot clearer about where the hurricane's going to move. So, because I think it's expected to make landfall about Saturday sometime, if I'm remembering the models. Anyway, so on that cheery note, it's about time to move to the interview portion of the broadcast, and joining us this week is a man who has had a very storied career within the industry. It's been a while we've had somebody who's had this long a career, but it's always nice when we do. Welcome to the program, Chris Avellone.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
No problem, no problem. All right, let's see. So we like to start things by beginning at the beginning. Specifically, what inspired you to get into video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
So that's an interesting question. It basically came down to, I noticed that whenever I had free time, I would either be wishing I could play Dungeons and Dragons, or if I couldn't do that, GMing a game of Dungeons and Dragons with my friends. And that occurred to me that's probably, if there is a career path that allows me to do that full time, that's kind of what pushed me into designing for video games. And I had no idea there was even a career like that. I thought, I might get lucky if I, write for pen and paper games. But to get into computer games, I don't know if they even had a job description that was computer game writer at the time when I was interested in it.
Based on other people we've talked to, not really, not back in those days.
No, actually, even the idea of a designer was kind of new. Like Blizzard didn't have design positions, and everyone who did game design was basically usually just the programmer that was working on the game itself. Yeah, a designer was even a new thing.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, back in those days, people wore a lot of hats.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how the industry has come full circle, because now a small team of like 3 or 4 people can do a game with a lot of the technology out there, and but back then that was also the case too. Usually it was like maybe 2 or 3 people, if that, doing a game. So the teams were usually just really very small.
Yeah, I certainly heard a lot of that back in the 80s, and even going all the way back to the early 70s or late 70s, actually.
Back in the ancient days of yore, yes.
Yes, we've actually had a few people who got their start in the late 70s.
By the way, what's the theme song for your podcast? It rocks.
Oh, that's that's an original composition done by our former music director.
Wow, well, kudos to him. It was really energizing.
Thank you. That is the point. Some people have not been so kind to it, because it is pretty heavy. But getting back to the question at hand, so how did the pen and paper love transition into the video game industry?
Well, because a number of game companies saw this is going to sound very mercenary, so brace yourselves. So because Dungeons and Dragons was such a popular franchise, people in the computer game industry learned pretty quickly that if you have that franchise associated with, any role-playing game, that's going to help drive the sales for it. So they looked very heavily for people that, had Dungeons and Dragons experience, were game masters, and at the time, there was a company called Interplay Entertainment, which is headed by Brian Fargo, who now runs In Exile Entertainment. And he had a division called Dragonplay, which was focused on doing D&D games. So someone I knew from the pen and paper industry was like, hey, Chris, I know you're probably a starving artist and will probably be forever as long as you work in pen and paper games. Why don't you apply to Dragonplay and see if there's any chance they might want to hire you on a junior designer? They just got the Planescape license. They're doing stuff with Forgotten Realms. You're probably pretty happy there. It's all the way in California. And I'm like, okay, sure. So I applied and got hired, and they started mining me for my D&D knowledge.
Funny story about Forgotten Realms. We had Ed Greenwood on our other podcast a couple
weeks ago.
Really?
How was that?
It was interesting.
Yeah. I'm like, he has a depth of knowledge that is profound.
I imagine he has a lot of stuff to share. I just call him Elminster. I don't even bother calling him Ed anymore. I'm just like Elminster.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, geez, I think we barely scratched the surface, and like, we'll definitely have him back on the sister program. Anyway, so what period of time was this when you first got hired by Interplay?
Oh, wow. Geez, I'm going to say it was probably around 1994, I think. And I could have this all wrong. Usually I try and research this stuff so my brain doesn't go south. And also I'm so great with numbers. But yeah, I think it was early 1990s, and then, worked for a few years on, various projects they had. And I think I was there for about 10 years. Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's about when Interplay was starting to have its troubles, if I'm remembering correctly.
That is correct. Yeah, around the 2004, 2005. Yeah, Interplay was just sort of hemorrhaging money, and they had a lot of debts to pay. Brian Fargo had departed a few years back. It was in the hands of some French company named Titus. And then Black Isle was starting to fall apart, and the future did not look great.
I mean, that actually, from other Interplay people we've talked to, that actually started around the mid '90s.
Yeah. Oh, it was. As I understand it, it was a slow burn like that. It was a number of decisions that led to that final part. The market was changing. There was a heavier focus on consoles. A lot of Interplay's business model had a lot to do with let's turn out 30 games, and if 2 of them are a hit, that covers the rest of them. But Yeah, there was a lot of things that contributed to it, but yeah, around 2004, it was definitely very, very bad.
Yeah, and yet through it all, Interplay is still a thing that exists.
That is right. It is still alive and kicking.
I mean, not much, but it's still alive. Like,
yeah, I don't actually know what their head count is. I think last I heard, and this could be incorrect, I think they have about 10 people working there. But they still had a pretty large portfolio to draw upon with old games they could convert to other platforms, and I think they were even planning to sell off some of their franchises not long ago. So who knows how they're doing now.
I can actually answer that question because
yay! All right, let's hear it.
We had Rebecca Heineman on our sister show.
Oh yeah, Becky.
Yeah, I'm like not too long ago, and she's actually working with the current Interplay, and I don't know about their headcount, but yeah, they she says they don't have a lot of money. And she's helping bringing their old games to Steam, and she kind of has to do it piecemeal because of their financial constraints.
I believe it. Yeah, Becky's really rad. I really like her.
Yeah, she's always a fun time when we have her on our shows. But anyway, so what was the first game you worked on at Interplay?
Ooh, that's tough. So there were a number of ones that never went beyond the paper stage. Some of the early titles I worked on was Descent to Undermountain, which overall was a great team that was following a really bad idea, and eventually that came out. That's probably the most praise that I can give it. But they were a good bunch of guys that were working on it. The other ones were Conquest of the New World. I worked a little bit on Star Trek Starfleet Academy, and probably a whole bunch of ones I'm forgetting. But those three kind of stand out. There were a lot of projects that sort of got started and then got canceled and got started and got canceled. But those are the three big ones that I remember.
Not an uncommon refrain from Interplay.
Actually, it's pretty common for a lot of studios to do a lot of different game pitches that really just never get off the ground. One of my mottos that I try and share with people just getting into the game industry is to please not take it too hard if one of your projects gets canceled or if someone doesn't accept your pitch, because that is a very, very common thing across the industry. When pitching a game, you might be lucky if you get through 10 or 11 different pitches of different ideas before one finally sticks. And also, you probably haven't been around the industry long enough if you haven't had one of your games canceled.
Or they came in through different means, because I'm like, we do a lot of indie games on this program, and we talk to a lot of people who are just entering the video game industry, but they're doing it through their own project.
Good. I always advocate that. I was at one college, and a group of students working on a project which looked really cool. They came up to me and they were very excited about the prospect of getting into AAA game development. Like they wanted to work for Ubisoft or some big developer. And I really, my first reaction was, why? Why do you want that? And they were like, well,
your souls are too pure. Don't do it.
Well, it was a long answer. I don't know if I flooded them with too much information, but I was like, look, if you go to a big developer, a big publisher, what you do is going to be very narrow in scope. Like you're going to learn a lot about how the industry pipeline works for projects, but the amount of stuff that you get to do versus what you'd be able to do in an indie project and how much more you would learn on an indie project, it's miles apart. So I actually encourage them to please stay in indie development because they're probably going to be stronger developers for it.
You're not wrong, especially since, well, in a lot of indie developments, it's not just, the development. It's the everything.
Yep.
As you said about going full circle, so much of the indie industry now is not just developing a game, but getting it out there.
Yep, and that's absolutely true. You have to learn how to put press kits together. You have to make your own press contacts. You have to learn quite a bit about marketing, distribution channels. You know, and unfortunate it is, you have to learn a lot about even like running a very small company, which is fraught with its own series of issues. But you will learn a lot, and even if it seems exhausting at the end of the day, you still have much more knowledge than you would have than if you went to a big developer.
Definitely. You know, I mean, it's a risky path. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, we've had developers on this program, you know, whose project got released, but it just didn't make it in the marketplace.
Yep, it's hard to get noticed.
You know, and it can be a heavy hit too, considering because these are independent projects. A lot of their own financial resources are tied to the project.
Yep.
So. I'm like that's why so many people have been worried about this so-called indie apocalypse, because there's just so many games coming out for Steam, iOS, what have you, and 10 years ago you could make a really brilliant indie game and people would notice. These days, I'm like, unless you got a hook to your thing, like say Stardew Valley, you might not be noticed.
No, I'd absolutely agree with that. I think it's like you said, like there's just so many titles out there, and the same thing is true with trying to do crowdsourcing, whether it's trying to get your app noticed, like all those things. It is a huge challenge, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Like anyway, so pressing forward on the Interplay days. What would you say was your first major project there?
That would be Planescape Torment. Actually, that's why I was brought to the studio. They just gotten the Planescape license, and they'd spent quite a deal of money on it, and they didn't have a team working on it. So when I first got there, the studio director, Marco Green, who was a fantastic writer, by the way, he did a writing for a lot of the Talking Heads in Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. He's quite good. He's like, hey, so if you were to pitch me a Planescape game, what kind of game would it be? And I'm like, well, I'm glad you asked. I think it'd be really cool if the game started after the death screen. And he's like, tell me more. And then I got hired. Great story.
Oh, I mean, short process. Like, I suppose, well, Planescape Torment is one of my favorite RPGs one of my favorite games of all time.
Oh, thank you.
No problem. In fact, we revisited Planescape when Beamdog was doing the extended edition, or the remastered edition, or whatever they're calling it.
It was the enhanced edition. Yeah, they actually brought me on to work on that, and I finally got a chance to edit all those bad files that had the most embarrassing run of spelling errors I think I've ever seen. I didn't know how to spell internment, which, for a Planescape game is actually used quite a bit. Yeah, there was a lot of embarrassing stuff there. So they gave me a chance to fix all that, and I'm really thankful to them.
Yeah. We had them on the show last season about the game.
Oh.
And yeah, it was like, and even did a review of it. It's over an hour long. But yeah, I liked what was done with the game. I'm like, it's the best of their remakes so far. And that's not just down to they're better about remastering these things technically, because they had a lot of problems in the Baldur's Gate games.
I heard the Icewind Dale one was pretty solid, but I never actually got a chance to play it.
Yeah, I think we talked about that, but these things being months ago, the information gets foggy.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
But so what was it like working on Planescape Torment? I mean, were you really excited finally getting to do your dream, or were you nervous?
I was pretty terrified most of the time. I thought I was going to get fired on more than one occasion. the word count was really high, which was a big problem for the localization team. And for anyone who's not familiar with what the localization team does, they're the ones that translate all the many words into other languages, which can get pretty expensive, especially when you consider Planescape. So there was that. We had a very small team compared to Baldur's Gate, so everyone was kind of wearing a lot of hats and running on fumes in that respect. I was pretty tired most of the time. I guaranteed a lot of health issues popped up as a result of just trying to work too hard. I didn't see many people outside the office, but I really loved working on the game, and just about everything involved with it was fun, just from inventory item descriptions to like doing area design docs, or just, you know, it's just, even just playing the game. We just had a blast doing it. So I look back on those times really fondly.
Sounds like it. Like, and what would you say was the biggest challenge in creating Planescape Torment?
Trying to decide at what point this is going to sound strange, at what point the D&D rules really mattered. And the reason was just because so many of the Planescape stuff had to do with, what you believed was reality. So you could actually alter the quote unquote law of D&D physics whenever you wanted to, if you wanted to make a point, which was really freeing, but also was kind of scary at the same time. So there was a lot of stuff that we adjusted about the mechanics that we thought would just make for a more fun narrative experience. I would argue that the combat portion of it wasn't terribly great, but I still think that people had fun with it.
You're not wrong on those accounts. Like, the combat has been consistently derided for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, very true.
Like, but and I've heard Planescape praised in terms like it's the best book you'll ever play.
Exactly. Yes, I've heard that quite a bit. That's not far off from the truth either.
D&D rules were becoming a real problem in second edition because, well, for those who don't know, who really didn't experience a lot of second edition, it really wasn't a unified field anymore. It was becoming more and more like a set of different universes that were becoming increasingly incompatible.
And of course, this means that if you had power gamers, which you did, they could like pull, and I'll use this ability from Ravenloft and this ability from Al-Qadim, and when I combine those together, I can get my armor class down to, because in those editions having a low armor class was good, some kind of ridiculous number.
Right. I'm like, did you do this yourself?
I did not, but I read a lot of stories about it when I was first getting into. Actually, I was getting into third edition a little bit, and about like why there's a third edition now, and some of it was the OGL stuff, and some of it was just we figured we needed to pull it back in a little,
which is true. I mean, incompatibilities were starting to show up there in first edition, like Dragonlance comes to mind and its weird rules, but. The second edition, Al-Qadim was really different than, say, Spelljammer, really different from Ravenloft, Dark Sun, and so on and so forth. So it's understandable that the standard rules would be hard to implement in something as arcane as Planescape.
Yeah, actually, I think it may have helped that we weren't allowed to reference any other campaign setting, because the way TSR / Wizards of the Coast sort of divvied up the franchise, they actually gave different worlds to different developers, so there wasn't a lot of overlap. So in some respects, that actually worked in our favor. But yeah, there were a lot of crazy rules to each different setting, and trying to make those mesh sometimes, I can't imagine how many programmer heads must have been split down the middle trying to do it.
It's a little weirder for Planescape and Spelljammer, which are kind of meta settings.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm like, Planescape and Spelljammer can get really complex if you're junctioning the other rule campaigns there. So.
I mean, obviously in Torment you're mostly in Sigil, and then in Sigil adjacent planar things, but theoretically in Planescape part of it is, oh hey, there's this whole bunch of different worlds on the prime material plane are different prime material planes that you can visit.
Yes, that's opens up a huge can of worms. And actually, I feel like the Planescape thing, we just focused maybe a little too much on Sigil, but we just figured because it was sort of going to be the introductory game that we should probably make sure that people understand the city. But I think the fact we didn't go to many other planes was kind of a negative. I wish we'd had more time to sort of expand the universe a bit more.
Unfortunate, especially since I liked the setting all the way back to its first edition incarnation. Once again, for those who don't know, Planescape was born out of this book called The Manual of the Planes, which is a first edition source book. I think I still got that lying around somewhere, but
because back then they were still making up for the rules of before they would have had genies summoned from another plane and demons from another plane, and then the Manual of the Planes was the first book that said, okay, so here's what those other planes are and what you find there.
Basically, and it lays out the elemental planes and all of the god planes and all that stuff.
Outer planes, yeah.
Yeah,
outer planes and the inner planes.
Yeah, and then there's the astral plane and the ethereal plane and prime material and all that stuff. And its Planescape incarnation, its core is pretty much the same, except they, what they really changed was they added Sigil. Like back in the Manual of the Planes, there was a place called a Concordant Opposition, the land of true neutrality. Home of the Lizard Man God, if I'm remembering correctly. And then in second edition, it became, the most nonsensical city you'll ever find. The city of infinite doors, the city that stands atop an infinite spire, however that works. I'm not even joking about that. I was like, wow, the central feature of this setting is a donut atop a spire, and that's where everybody lives. They live on the inside of the hollowed out donut. I'm like, all right, this is going to be interesting. Yeah. Anyway, it sounds like there were at one point plans to do a Planescape sequel.
Yeah, it was discussed really briefly. I think after numerous doctor visits, though, I think I just did not have the energy to keep pushing on that. I mean, there were some ideas kicked around for it, but I don't know if any of them really would have been the best direction to take the franchise. And I think the first game pretty much stood on its own. There were plans to do a PlayStation game at one point, but that sort of fell through, and their team sort of got incorporated into the Torment team, and then also got moved over to, I think, Stone Keep 2, which was just a managerial train wreck. So that, at least Torment came out.
I mean, Stone Keep 2 was 5 years of development and nothing to show for it.
Yeah, I mean, they had some really beautiful art. I think they had a really good design direction. I think just getting there, though, I don't know what the issue was. I think just the idea of doing so all games run on an engine like Unreal or Unity. However, trying to make an engine on your own is a very difficult task, and it's something that Black Isle never really managed to do. Like they just couldn't make that happen. So that's why so often they had to use BioWare's Infinity engine, or they tried to use, a Monolith's Lift Tech engine, just because they didn't have the capability to make one on their own. They tried to do it for Baldur's Gate 3 and Fallout Van Buren, but I'm really not sure how far along that engine really got, or how far it would have gone. So
I think based off the beta version of Van Buren, it got pretty far, but obviously not far enough.
Yeah, I think it was enough for to do a demo, but and a lot of that was borrowed from work that was done on the BG3 engine. Yeah, I guess the weird thing was I think that the upper management had already decided to cancel it like months earlier, so I think those guys just ended up laboring in vain. And to be honest, once Baldur's Gate 3 was canceled for no good apparent reason, like the idea that Van Buren would see the light of day was pretty remote, which was really sad, especially if you have so much love invested in Fallout, and then suddenly you realize that, even if you work as hard as you did on Baldur's Gate 3, circumstances beyond your control will cancel it. So that was pretty grim.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the exact reason. I think it had to do with the license itself, because I remember there was a lot of friction between Interplay and Wizards by that point.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Interplay probably wasn't paying the bills. I do think, if I recall correctly, and I don't know how much of this is true, it's just what we were told, is or how the story got skewed. And maybe someone wasn't intentionally lying; they were just describing it in their own words. But the way it was described to us was an accounting error. It wasn't that they were unhappy necessarily with anything we were doing. It's just, well, someone didn't pay a bill or a zero got misplaced, and that was all the excuse. Someone needed to take it and do something else with it. So there you go.
Makes sense. Well, and that company that eventually took the ball was Atari.
Yep.
Okay, outside of Planescape, what else did you work on during the Black Isle days?
Let's see. I had the chance to work on Fallout 1, but had to turn it down, which sucked. But I did work on Fallout 2 after Tim Kaine and Leonard Bjarski and Jason Anderson went off to form Troika and work on Arcanum. So we worked on Fallout 2, worked on the Icewind Dale series. My God, my head is, and then of course Baldur's Gate 3, and I worked on Lionheart for a little bit, which was a weird experience, and then also during like the last 3 or 4 years at Interplay, I also was doing a lot of pen and paper design for the first iteration of Fallout Van Buren, and I had a whole design documents, all the trait and skill systems set up and the perks. Like, hey, here's how the Ghoul player character will work, the Super Mutant player character will work. Here's the areas. Here's the cool stuff we're gonna do. Some of that stuff we were able to use in New Vegas, but it was really sad to say goodbye to that stuff at the time.
I don't doubt it. I mean, it was sad to see Van Buren not be a thing. I'm like, I'll be honest, there are people who are still not over that, especially because they don't like the Bethesda-era Fallout games. But, such is life, I suppose.
Yeah, I certainly enjoyed working on it. It was really tough being like the only developer on it, because I was like, well, what the hell do I do? Like, I don't have a great deal of programming experience, and I wouldn't even call it programming. I call it more like basic level scripting. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just go back to my pen and paper roots and go, hey, how much of this can I just paper prototype? And what I'll do is I'll just take people in the company that are likely to work on Van Buren. I'll see if they want to be players in the campaign, and then we'll just keep playing and try and develop the game so that when it does finally happen, we can all hit the ground running, and they'll already be familiar with where it's going, like player character setups, the rules, and that was a lot of fun. There was like about 10 or 12 people across 2 campaigns, and they didn't even know they were in the same campaign world at first. They thought they were running 2 completely different Fallout campaigns until they suddenly noticed. They kept hearing a lot about another group out there doing things, and they're like, "Hey, wait a minute!" And then, so that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working on that.
That actually sounds like an interesting way to develop a world for a video game, for a role playing game, is by like dummying it out with. Because one of the limitations about a video game role playing thing, obviously, is that there are some limitations on the choices you can make, because there is absolutely no way to program for everything that people will do in pen and paper.
That is correct.
But if you run it first in pen and paper, you'll come up with ideas you would never come up with otherwise for some of the things that people might want to do.
Yeah, and I totally agree, and that's exactly what happened. There were like 12 different character archetypes. Like, okay, so we had like the super mutant, Nightkin stealth character. Like, when you have a character like that, your responsibility as a GM is like, okay, well, how do I make the adventure exciting for this character? And because there were 12 different archetypes running around in these campaigns, it really stretched what each area had to consider in a good way. Like, sometimes the players would think of better quest solutions or more interesting quest solutions than I'd ever spec'd out, and that just became part of our notes for okay, well when we do the final version of this area, we definitely should do X, Y, and Z based on what you guys were doing in the adventure because that's cooler than what's actually there, and that helped a lot.
I suppose that begs the question: was there ever a plan to develop like an official Fallout pen and paper campaign setting?
I don't think there was a lot of talk about it. Maybe just because computer games just made so much more. I do know there was a pen and paper game for Fallout Tactics. It was more sort of like a tabletop tactical game as opposed to a role playing game. But no actual Fallout hardbound rule book version of it. I'm sure people would have been interested in it, but I don't think there were the resources there to make it happen or the inclination from people high up to make it happen.
That is actually a shame.
Yeah.
It is.
I'll be honest. I would like to play Fallout in a pen and paper setting. I think it would work well, but that would be up to Bethesda now. At any rate, you also mentioned you worked on a game called Lionheart: Legacy of the Crusader, and you mentioned it as a weird experience.
Yeah, managerially, but not on. So it was developed by a studio called Reflexive. Reflexive was not the odd part of that equation. The odd part was me and another designer and a programmer were sent over there to help, but the sort of direction we got from within Black Isle production was really just confusing. So we tried to help as best we could. We're like, hey, here's how we script out dialogues, and here's how often we do skill checks and why we do these skill checks here, here, and here. Here's how to structure dialogues. Does it go like, too far afield? Because if you try and write a dialogue that's too organic, it can get away from you, especially in a role-playing game. So you have to be careful about how you sort of like trim the branches. And then one of the designers was like helping around, I believe, inventory items, and another one was helping out with programming some aspect of the code. I don't recall, but eventually it got so confusing as to what we were supposed to be doing over there that I was like, I actually sort of mandatorily just went and go, you know what, I'm coming back to Black Isle rather than going to Reflexive every day, and I am going to work on Van Buren because I don't think you have a clear direction for what you want us to do at the studio, nor are you watching it very carefully. So I am going to withdraw from this situation.
Like, that would explain everything, honestly, because I've actually played Lionheart, and once you got out of the first chapter, it kind of fell apart.
It had a lot of challenges, again, coming from the Black Isle direction. Like they couldn't get Reflexive paid on time, I believe. There was some huge interview about it with one of the developers at Reflect, maybe one of the owners. I don't recall exactly, but yeah, they were having trouble getting paid, which is really rough. That's the only project your studio is working on, and it was not I felt bad for those guys.
Well, they managed to at least survive the development of Lionheart.
That is true.
It's like, though they don't exist now for whatever reason Amazon decided to disband them for. Like, unfortunate, but moving forward. So what precipitated your departure from Black Isle / Interplay? Was it something you decided, or was it something that was decided for you?
Oh no, it was just about everybody that left at that time. It was their decision. They just knew that after it was not long after Baldur's Gate 3 got canceled, and really the only thing that was keeping most people there was because it switched over to Fallout. But then again, like, you just weren't sure Fallout was ever really going to happen. So yeah, so at that I just turned in my resignation letter, and it's really weird. Like, they didn't even ask me. They didn't even ask me, like, why I was resigning. They were just more interested in if someone else was poaching me. Like, it was so short-sighted that I'm like, I can't believe I'm having this conversation with you. Like, if you don't understand what's going on in your own divisions to the point where that's your question you're going to ask me in an exit interview, maybe it's really good that I'm leaving right now because your priorities are all fucked.
I would say that would be a correct assessment, considering, the shit really hit the fan with Interplay in 2004. Like, So, did you immediately go to Obsidian afterwards, or did you work elsewhere?
I worked with a company that did Dark Alliance games for Black Isle. It was a company called Snowblind. They did the first Dark Alliance game, and they were doing a Champions of Norath EverQuest game in that same style, and they asked if I would come in and help script doctor it. And I'm like, sure, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then after that, I transitioned over to Obsidian, although, the freelancing was pretty nice. I mean, it was pretty relaxing.
I mean, we'll probably be getting back to that soon enough. Foreshadowing. Anyway, so I suppose the same question applies with Obsidian. What did you end up working there when you got there?
The first thing was Knights of the Republic 2. And then after that, I worked on Companions for Neverwinter 2. And then just about pitched in or, advised on almost every other project in the studio, except possibly for Armored Warfare and Skyforge. But beyond that, when you're a creative director, you get to sort of just examine, advise, and give feedback on a lot of the design documents taking place at the studio.
Did you enter into that role when you got to Obsidian, or is that something that happened later?
That was the role that I was brought on. That was the title that I was going to be having at the company. It was kind of, it was sometimes really ill-defined, and attempts to get it defined were not encouraged. So what would end up happening is okay, well, I can function pretty well when I need to reach a destination point. But what ended up being easier, because strangely enough, these other titles had more hierarchy and structure because I'd laid them out. I would do things like, okay, well, I'm going to be lead designer on this, or creative lead on this, or a level designer on that. And then that would set the structure very clearly. I knew who I would talk to about the vision for the game. I would know who my level design lead would be. I would get how that was standards, but I'd know what those standards were. At all other times, it just became nebulous when it wasn't one of those roles, which would occasionally get frustrating.
Right, and there's quite a bit to cover here. What was the best project you would say you worked on at Obsidian, and what ended up being the most challenging?
Well, I liked working on Knights of the Republic 2. I don't think it was the best title that came out from Obsidian by a long shot, mostly because it wasn't finished. I laugh, but inside I weep. The one that I think is probably the most solid, though, that I really enjoyed Mask the Betrayer. I thought that for an expansion for Neverwinter 2, I thought it hit all the right notes. It was in a different setting of the Forgotten Realms that people weren't as familiar with, and it was more interesting. And the companion design was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed working with Tony Evans, one of the designers, and George Zeitz, who was also working on that title. And I've had the chance to work with George a number of projects over the years, and I just really like his design aesthetic. I think he's really talented.
I've heard a lot of praise over Mask of the Betrayer over the years. Not just it's the best expansion, but people have considered it to be the best part of Neverwinter Nights period.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think Storm of Zahir went in a different direction. I personally don't think that direction was a bad one, but people had the expectation of wanting more Neverwinter 2 and Mask the Betrayer content. So I think Storm of Zahir sort of defied their expectations.
I suppose that's unfortunate. If they were expecting, everything to line up with Mask of the Betrayer, considering, different teams were doing different expansion packs and modules.
Yeah, it was always just a smaller team and a smaller team. And, that was the same old story back at Black Isle. You really have to be careful if you're turning out products that way. because smaller team just means you can't have full companions. Like you can't match all those expectations because you don't have the work crew to actually get that done, and it can end up hurting the project. So you have to be careful with that. Even if you think you're making a great business decision, which often you aren't, it can absolutely hurt the projects and the reputations of the company.
Right. And speaking of such things, what was it like in the earlier days of Obsidian compared to like the mid, a couple of years ago?
It was pretty chaotic. We didn't have a lot. Well, we had to rely on a lot of support from our publishers when it came to things like audio. Like we didn't really have a audio department or like a full QA department. Like we had to rely on contractors that were supplied by the publisher, and those guys worked really hard, but it would have been nice to always have like an internal QA team. Like it just makes sense, but you have to be able to afford that first. Also, we didn't really have a hardcore IT department early on. Yeah, there were just a lot of challenges. There was a lot of logistics and just trying to get the studio started, which made things difficult. But I think a lot of those eventually got ironed out. It just took a while.
I'm like Obsidian's been around for a good 10 years plus, so they must be doing something right.
Yeah, they've gone through their ups and downs. There's been, there's a tide of, hiring, and occasionally if a project gets canceled, like, with Stormlands or Armored Warfare, like there will be the large clumps of layoffs, which it happens at studios. But yeah, there has been the sort of the rising tide and the ebb of the tide. So, but they have survived, yeah.
Right, and so moving forward, next games I see are Alpha Protocol and Fallout New Vegas.
Yes, indeed.
And how involved were you with these games?
Let's see, with Alpha Protocol, I came in halfway through production when they sort of went in a new direction. They sort of reorganized the project. And then I came on as sort of lead designer and then creative lead. Someone else was handling system design, and our project director, Chris Parker, was sort of in charge of the overall design and the systems. And then I kind of just handled the story. And we worked with Sega on that. Sega really didn't have a lot of issues with the storyline. I think their issues were mostly with just the mechanics of the game. So that and plus, Alpha Protocol had its share of challenges. Like I'm really proud about that title. But clearly, like if you measured that against Splinter Cell or Mass Effect 2, like both of those games, like blew Alpha Protocol like out of the water easily. And that's even if Alpha Protocol didn't have the issues that it did. So I'm proud of the work on it. I do recognize that we were probably a little out of our element on that. And there were a lot of X factors that we had to learn that other companies had already figured out in their titles. And I think that definitely showed.
Couldn't speak to that because I have Alpha Protocol. I just haven't gotten around to playing it yet. Like, so many games, so little time. Right? But that's definitely what I've heard about Alpha Protocol back in the day. Like, I remember Mass Effect 2 being used as a pretty big measuring stick against it.
Oh yeah, well, Mass Effect 2 was freaking great. Like you're just like the cinematic conversations, like they had their whole pipeline down. Like they figured a lot of stuff out from, Coder 1, and then also like Mass Effect 1. Like they had their process down really good, and they could focus on the content. For us, like we were just playing catch up, and it definitely showed.
That is unfortunate. Like. Because as I understand it, Alpha Protocol did not do too well in the marketplace.
I actually don't know. I'm gonna agree with you there and say that's probably that's most likely the case. It certainly didn't merit a sequel. Sega seemed to know pretty quickly on they wouldn't want to do a sequel for I don't even know if I know all the reasons, but I'm sure the fact that it kind of like didn't make a splash was definitely part of that.
Well, like maybe one day they'll change their minds.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. That'd be nice. I do know that it usually depends. Like, companies like Sega or just big publishers, sometimes they rotate through various executives, and each of them has a different plan or a way of using past franchises. So who knows? It could absolutely work out. I know that I think it'd be fun to work on another Alpha Protocol. I think that would it'd be a lot of fun.
And we are certainly now more than ever in an era of, and that thing that you thought everyone had forgotten about is getting a sequel for some reason.
That's very true.
Or remake or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like over the weekend, a new Nightmare Creatures game got announced. I'm like,
The hell?
that was my reaction.
Same here.
Like, I saw this, I'm like, wow, that's a thing I haven't thought about in about 20 years, however long it's been.
And now it's been raised from the dead.
Pretty much.
Apparently, death is not sacred in this industry.
I mean,
not in the game industry, it's not.
No. I mean, we've got Bubsy coming back, and that's not even the most. That's not even the most inexplicable resurrection I've seen from that developer. That goes to the great Gianna sisters.
Yeah, because at least Bubsy everyone's heard of, even if it's for mostly bad reasons.
The Great Gianna Sisters is only something you'll know about if you're really into like the Commodore 64 scene, or you're European or something like that.
European.
Well, it was basically an answer to Super Mario Brothers, and
hence Italian sibling pair.
Yeah, I'm like, and its design was way too close to Super Mario Brothers for Nintendo, and they actually got the game off the market. Like, but anyway, so Fallout New Vegas. What concepts from Van Buren did you manage to get into this title?
There was a number of things. The visual design for Joshua Graham came from that. The whole idea of the Burn Man's look. The idea that the Nightkin were going crazy because of Stealth Boy technology was scrambling their brains. The Boulder, the original name for the Big Empty was, Old World Blues was the Boulder Dome, where it had all the science facilities stored there. And the one in Old World Blues ended up being smaller, but the basic concept, including the intro movie almost verbatim, came from Van Buren. Although I think in Van Buren, the Big Empty was actually like some robotic military training facility for soldiers, and the Boulder Dome was something different. So for Old World Blues, they just mashed the two together. The enemy in Dead Money, Elijah, was originally a companion, and he was a good guy in Van Buren. I'm trying to think what else. There was and the whole idea of the Brotherhood of Steel, NCR War, the Caravan Mafia families, all that stuff. And Caesar's Legion in name, not the final implementation, which was a lot different. All of that sort of had its roots in Van Buren.
Sounds like quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, and also like Hoover Dam, although Hoover Dam and Van Buren was actually more of a town, like all the wreckage that had piled up behind the dam in the Colorado River. People had like built sort of like a dock-like settlement in Van Buren, and that was sort of one of the big NCR central locations.
How much would you say was new content versus recycled in New Vegas?
Oh, I think new content was a lot. At least 70%. I think a lot of the changes just came about by the fact that Vegas was going to be the signature city, and there needed to be a lot of content to sort of reinforce its presence in the area, why it's there, the power dynamics. A lot of the quest lines for NCR and Caesar's Legion also had to feed into that. And Mr. House, who I believe was a creation by John Gonzalez, the lead writer. And I love Mr. House, and John's a great guy. He worked on Shadows over Mordor and also he did the writing for most recently Horizon Zero Dawn, and did a fantastic job there. Yeah, he was great to work with. Yeah, so there was a great deal of new content made for New Vegas. Absolutely.
Sounds like it. And one thing I've been wondering about is, was there a particular reason why Bethesda approached Obsidian to work on a Fallout game?
I think they just thought it was probably a really good fit. I do know Bethesda was reaching out to a number of studios that had particular specialties. Like they reached out to In Exile to do Demon's Forge. They reached out to Splash Damage, I believe, for Brink. They sort of like were looking to bolster their portfolio, I believe. Like, and I'm not a biz dev guy, so I couldn't tell you exactly all the reasons, but I think they just wanted to see what other properties and franchises they could grow using developers that were skilled in those areas. And if I were them, I would have looked at Obsidian and go, well, these guys aren't really great at creating their own technology, just like Black Isle wasn't, but they create really good content on top of someone else's engine. So maybe there's a good fit there. So I think I would be surprised if that didn't factor into their thinking.
Nor would I. And I suppose that flows into the question of how troubled the development process was on New Vegas.
I don't know if it was really that troubled. I think some of the earlier titles, just a lack of resources and optimistic projections, probably had more trouble development than New Vegas did. I don't recall New Vegas, being especially rushed or a chore, or it just seemed to be a title that overall I don't look back on and go, wow, that was a nightmare. Not at all. But New Vegas, I feel like it doesn't have any alarm bells when I remember it.
It's good to hear, because I remember there was a lot of grumbling about New Vegas back in the day because, how do I put this? It's a Bethesda title, and Bethesda titles are not known for being stable out the gates.
I mean, it could be worse. Fallout 3 on PC is literally unplayable unless you rip the Games for Windows Live DRM out.
Yeah, fair enough point. But yeah, it's like, I just remember a lot of people complaining about how buggy the game was. Them not being presumably all that familiar with, like I said, Bethesda RPGs. There's nothing against them. It's just, with their RPGs being so big, they tend to be very buggy.
Yeah, I guess this is something I'd say about just RPGs in general, depending on how you design them. If you ever give, and I'm not citing Obsidian as a specific example of this, I've seen this happen in plenty of places, but when you give a developer who's not as familiar with the engine technology they're being given, there's a whole bunch of secrets in there that developers know about that an external developer might not know about. And we had that issue with Snowblind back on Black Isle, where their engine was very, very difficult to figure out, and we needed their help to decipher a lot of the stuff. It was stuff that we just never would have known to ask if they were not available. So there's that challenge, and then it's exactly what you said about RPGs. There's so many permutations for how people can play the game, and that's if QA is actually allowed to play the game. And what I mean by that is often QA is broken down into testing very specific things. They might test the critical path and only the critical path, or someone might be assigned to run through every door in the game on every build. Crazy tasks like that isn't the same thing as someone playing a game and then encountering an issue that a regular player might encounter just in a normal playthrough. And that's why having team members just sit down and play the game is sometimes it's really important, because they'll go with the flow of being a role-playing game player and are likely to find out things that QA either doesn't have the numbers for, or they just haven't been tasked to do. And QA has got enough to do on every single project that comes out. They work really hard.
Yeah. Being a game tester, especially for a large RPG, is probably the closest thing you can get to hell on this planet.
Yeah, some people get really excited about the prospect, and I'm like, look, please keep in mind that you will not be playing a finished product for most of the experience, and you may be doing some very unusual things as a tester that aren't even remotely fun.
Yeah,
So
a lot of
be
people seem
prepared.
to think testing involves, oh man, I get to play the games before everybody else does it. That's not what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's technically true, but oh, are your expectations way off base? Oh no. Like, but anyway, well, it's good to hear that development was relatively smooth on New Vegas. I'm like, I was Bethesda pleased with the overall product?
I guess so. I actually do not know. I still to this day don't know how much it sold. I actually don't necessarily know what the reception was on a number of fronts. I do know that I'm very proud to have worked on it. I really like working on the DLCs too. And I think it was a good product for Obsidian to do. I think it brought them a lot of notice that they weren't necessarily getting from other projects.
I'm like it. It's hard to gauge because we really haven't seen an external Fallout project since then.
No, that's very true. Like beyond Fallout Shelter, I don't think I've seen anything.
But then again, games are so much bigger than even they were just a generation ago. Fallout 4 comes to mind. At any rate, so moving a bit forward here, we have Pillars of Eternity and Wasteland 2. And also FTL Advanced Edition.
Yes. I love working on FTL. I'm still working with the FTL guys. The actual company's name is Subset Games, and they're one of the indie developers I was talking about. FTL obviously did really well for them.
Right.
And I loved FTL so much. Like I was like, hey guys, like I'll work on this for free, and they're like, all right, sounds good to us. But then
I've never actually played that, but I have a lot of friends who are big fans.
Get ready to lose a lot of hours once you fire it up, because
that's why I haven't. I've never said, if I play this game, I'm probably gonna want to spend about 4 hours in a row, and I haven't had that.
Yep, that's very true. They're doing a new game called Into the Breach, which I'm working on with them, and it's like giant mechs beating up insects in a world on the edge of destruction. So it's got a lot of the elements of FTL in terms of replayability, and it's a lot of fun.
I've played a bit of FTL, but wasn't my thing. Like, I don't know, it's like I tend not to play roguelikes too much. Like, I think that's just a personal thing. But yeah, certainly heard a lot of stuff about FTL, especially since it was like one of the shining lights of the early Kickstarter movement.
Yeah, it went. It did. It was definitely something that stood out on crowdsourcing, and it did very well. Like I think Divinity is another one. Yeah, it was back in the days when we could actually get noticed on Kickstarter. It's kind of a lot more difficult nowadays.
Well, there are reasons for that. It's a lot of poisoned well water at this point. Like good or bad, there have been a number of high-profile Kickstarter projects that have soured people on the entire idea of crowdfunding. And I know it's hit the video game segments especially hard because it's not a thing that's happening in other board games and card games. They're doing really well on Kickstarter from what I've heard. But video games, it's been a bit of a slowdown.
Yeah, video games are. Not that board games are easy at all. I mean, to play, I would never say that. Especially if you have to contract out tokens or game pieces, and getting that whole process squared away can be a pain in itself. But video games by nature, they're tricky beasts. And if it's the first time you've done a certain type of game, Like you have no idea, like, you know, what could possibly go wrong because you've just never been through the process before. And that's something that people just have to keep in mind. Like there's going to be a lot of gotchas in there for the developers, and you should be prepared for those eventualities.
Yeah,
Plus, some people are backing a thing for nostalgia things and then forget that nostalgia is exactly the way that it was, and then they don't like what they get, even though it was exactly what they were promised.
Yeah, and
not to name names or anything.
Yeah, you know, when they view some games through the eyes of nostalgia, like so we have this issue on System Shock. Like, I'm working on the System Shock reboot with Night Dive, and the original System Shock 1, like, you know, doesn't even have free mouse look. Like, I bet money people have forgotten all about that, but that's something you wouldn't want to directly translate into a new version of System Shock.
No. We're actually Steven's actually a pretty good friend of ours, and we talked about the System Shock remake like 6 months ago, I think. It's been a measure of time, but yeah, we talked about the fact that the original System Shock doesn't have any mouse look, and that was the standard at the time.
Yep, like, that's correct.
You know, it's like mouse look really didn't become the like an actual standard until about the time of Quake and Duke Nukem 3D.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
Like, so what else are you doing on the System Shock remake? How is that progressing?
Oh, it's going pretty good. The idea is it's not a remaster or a remake. They're actually we're actually adding new content to the game, so like new levels, you know, different setup for the characters, going more in depth on certain story elements, and then that's just the narrative side. I'm sure Steven probably could have shared with you all the other stuff that's going on the programming and art side, but the love for System Shock sure is shining through.
Yeah, I remember that. Now, like, especially since Steven, well, he founded his company on getting System Shock.
Yeah, Night Dive, I think their whole Steven's kind of goal was that he just didn't want a lot of classics to be forgotten, so he's sort of made sure to sort of resurrect old classics and bring them to the modern age of gamer, which I think is that's kind of a really cool thing to share with people. And I think the fact that he's so primed about it is it's really inspiring sometimes.
Oh, no doubt. As I said, we've had many conversations on that, on game preservation, because, you know, I'm a historian, so it's something that's near and dear to my heart as well, especially since game preservation isn't all that good. It's getting better. It's definitely getting better, but, you know, it's got a long ways to go, and this is why, you know, I'll go against the grain in terms of the industry and say I don't mind pirated games if they're literally the only thing that's saving a game. You know, if it's that or Oblivion, then so be it. Until, you know, a more legitimate thing can come along.
Well, what I like is just the number of communities that have sprouted up around, like, sort of maintaining certain games, like even with System Shock, to read all the forums for people that, you know, and, you know, Vampire Bloodlines has this too, where it's just like there are so many people out there that are fighting to keep it alive and improving it and making sure that, you know, it works with every single, new iteration of systems or new, you know, download service, because they just love the game so much. And that's always really encouraging to see. It's like the players are sort of giving it the life and helping it along when, chances are the original developers or publishers just either don't have the time or the inclination, or, it's just so, they've got other things to worry about. But the seeing players do that for games they love is really awesome to see.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just like Night Dive. There are other companies that are doing this in one way or another, like THQ Nordic. They've bought a whole bunch of old IP, like Novalogic. And, they've been preserving things. So it's good that this is a thing that's happening, is my estimation. Anyway, you are also working on some other games here, like Pathfinder Kingmaker, And over to you, Gollix, for this, because you're our Pathfinder guy.
Yeah, that's the main tabletop thing that I play currently is Pathfinder, and I suppose I know the answer, but Kingmaker is one of the published Pathfinder adventure paths. So it's not like the first one or anything, and it's certainly not the latest one. So even though I have a pretty good idea, why don't you say why this is the one that was chosen for video game adaptation?
Well, so that's a few reasons. One is, so considering that you play Pathfinder, I think you'll be happy to know that there's a great many Russians that apparently love the living hell out of Pathfinder and play a lot of it. And they've been wanting to do a computer game for a while. And they've played Kingmaker across several different game masters and play sessions. And they each have their own individual stories with Kingmaker. And they just love that particular adventure path. And for any listener who's not familiar with an adventure path is, it's like 6 modules that are all sort of tied together that sort of advance your characters from level 1 all the way up to, you know, some ungodly level.
Usually around 17, because by that point you have 9th level spells, and therefore the GM's ability to keep you on a track is pretty much entirely dependent on your own good grace.
That is exactly true. So they love Kingmaker. Kingmaker is a popular adventure path in Pathfinder. And so it was chosen as, why don't we make this the spine, see what we can add to it from our individual game sessions and stories? Is there something more that we can do to flesh out like the antagonist and the plot line? Is there more stuff that we can do telling stories through companion arcs for companions you find in the game? And all of that became really exciting. But I think Owlcat made the smart move where they're like, you know what? Rather than make up a story completely from scratch, since this is our first foray into the RPG space, and we know RPGs, but we've never actually like sat down and built one exactly like this. Why don't we use this as a foundation to build upon and use its strengths to sort of help us to make a really good role-playing game? And Kingmaker's a pretty great series of adventure modules, so it seemed like a natural fit.
It's one of the more open-ended ones.
Yes.
The basic plot outline of Kingmaker is basically that your group of player characters has been given royal license to basically settle an area that the royals who gave you that license contend was stolen from their kingdom. And obviously there are people living there, so you have to people and fairies and stuff. So you have to
and nothing would ever go wrong in that scenario, by the way.
No, nothing at all.
Smooth sailing.
And it's also the adventure path that introduced a lot of, for people who like civilization simulation stuff, it has a light version of that in that you can sort of plan your towns and stuff.
Yeah, so it's rather than having just a stronghold, you actually end up having like your kingdom ends up being the thing that you fiddle with, and that the customization there, I think, is another big plus. A lot of RPGs don't always go that far when it comes to quote unquote your stronghold, but with this they're definitely incorporating a lot of those Kingmaker mechanics, so that was a pretty cool aspect of the title too.
And one of the things that I've seen from following the Kickstarter, I backed that game, is this is one of those games that is one of the adventure paths that is more open to players being kind of whatever alignment you want.
Yeah, and you know what? I think with one thing that I really like about Pathfinder is they take that approach with a lot of their modules in the sense that they encourage exploration. Like there's not always a set series of quest A goes to part B, goes to part C. They lay out a situation for you and they give you events to react to or events that you could find through exploration, but through the basic RPG stuff that all RPG players do. And then they're like, we trust you to have fun with this, and here's a bunch of details that will help you have fun, and that's what I like about it.
Got any more questions there, Gollix? Or
I could go on for a long time, but I figured I'd like break it and see if anybody else wanted to say anything.
Fair enough. We'll probably have you back on the show, Chris, as Pathfinder Kingmaker makes its way through development.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Yeah. I mean, but we are getting low on time, so just a couple more. segments here. For example, you are also working on Divinity Original Sin 2, correct?
Yeah, so that comes out in about a week, and that is going to be pretty amazing. I am still staggered by all the cool shit that's in that game. The creative director, Sven, if there's any person that loves making games and has a whole host of cool ideas for stuff that should go in those games, it's Sven.
Admittedly, we haven't had Laharian Studios on the show yet, but maybe one day. So, and you know, the original Sin, if you will, seemed, you know, seemed to have been, you know, it was one of the best RPGs of 2014.
Yep, it you know, for me it was one of the things that really stood out was, you know, not the combat was pretty smooth, and then also what I really liked was there was a lot of stuff that you could do with the dungeon exploration that just felt really easy to do. That it made me question why things had been so complicated before. Be like, you know, simple things like, you know, being able to use, like, you know, the water barrels to douse flames and stuff that seems really basic, but it just required the right interface and a smooth enough interface to really make that really easy and fun to do. And that was like only one of the system elements that was in Divinity where I'm like, wow, this is a really polished experience.
And what has changed, been upgraded, what have you, in the sequel here?
Oh, there's a lot. There is a lot of fleshing out with the companion backstories. That's a lot of what I was involved with Original Sin 2, and those have really huge impacts on the plot. Also, the way those companions are designed are a lot different. Oh god, I'm gonna do it anyway. For anyone out there who doesn't want to hear a spoiler, just shut your ears for 2 minutes. There's one character, like, you know, who's possessed by a demon, and sometimes a demon takes over your dialogue responses. And when the demon gets really upset, like, suddenly all the dialogue responses are all the same because the demon is so insistent about getting its message out. And it sounds crazy, but when you play it, like, you feel the fear and you feel the situation of not being fully in control of your own character, and that's a really neat experience. And they do touches like that with almost all the companions. Like, they have this Mask of the Shapeshifter, which allows you to, like, change your race, and you can sort of pantomime being any of the other races in the game and get their dialogue options. And it's all this just really cool stuff to play around with that I don't usually see a lot in RPGs, and I think people are really going to enjoy them.
Sounds really interesting. I'm actually really intrigued with that demon option, as it were.
That's I've seen that come up the other way in some of the Shin Megami Tensei games where you're doing a demon negotiation and just all of the text options you get are the same, and it's like, yep. Well, I don't know if these will all be the same result or different ones, but here we go.
I imagine the effect's much the same. Like, yeah. Right. So, are there any other projects you wish to talk about at this time?
No. Divinity is coming out September 14th. I just checked to make sure that was the correct date. And and I think that's pretty much the big one on the radar for right now. We've already discussed Kingmaker. So I'm not here to really plug any products. I just wanted to chat with you guys.
No problem. You know, we just want to make sure everyone, you know, has their, you know, business stated clearly and all that. Like, and it was wonderful talking to you, Chris.
Well, thanks to you guys for even having me on. I appreciate the invite.
No problem. We'll definitely have you on in a, you know, when Pathfinder becomes more of a thing, because I'm sure Galix here will be able to, like just do that interview himself.
I'm looking forward to it. Then that sounds great.
Mm-hmm. All right. So once again, Chris Avellone, formerly of Obsidian, now Freelancer. He's working on a number of projects, you know, including Divinity Original Sin 2 out next week. How much is that going for? Is that full price, $40?
Yeah, I actually did not check the price before getting on this call, so I actually do not know. But I'm going to guess Google could help out with that. I do not know off the top of my head.
Here we go. Steam has it for $44.99.
Oh, that's a bargain.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good price, especially for a fully featured RPG.
Yeah, I'm pretty. That's great.
Yeah. So, yeah, that'll about do it. Looking forward to having you on the broadcast again, whenever that may be. Like, we'll shoot you an invite and all that stuff.
Sounds great.
Yeah. All right. So the week ahead. Petty Fan, do you want to go first?
Well, I guess coming up next, we have Ben Heckendor from the Ben Heck Show on MSP.
I'm actually looking forward to that. I like his mod videos.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm also just an electronics nerd, so...
Well, yeah, it's right up your alley as well. Anyway, coming up on Fragments, let's see. Provided that nothing gets delayed, as we mentioned in the opening, this Friday we've got a multiplayer session with both Rock of Ages 2 and Crash Day Redline Edition, and we're doing reviews of both this upcoming Sunday. Next week we don't have any Tuesday interview, but next Wednesday we'll be welcoming Zach Johnson and Kevin Simon of Asymmetric Publications. They are the developers of the Loathing franchise, Kingdom of Loathing, and the recent release West of Loathing, which we did a review of not too long ago. And I'm looking forward to it. West of Loathing is one of the best games I've played this year. And I'm really interested to hear how they created such a funny game. So until next time, I wish you good gaming.